In the age before remembrance, when the stars themselves whispered omens of ruin, a question echoed through Forbidden's vaults. What becomes of the soul when chaos chooses to look back? From this ancient dread, the chronicle awakens. It begins on Veharis Prime, a world cracked by forgotten crusades, where the ecclesiarchy still scraped hymns into stone as if scripture alone could bind the nightmares beneath its soil. The air tasted of old death and sanctified dust. Pilgrims moved as shadows between ruined cathedrals, clutching relics that had survived more wars than memory could hold. Above all hung the unspoken truth. Some ruins stay buried for a reason. Yet in the ash-choked dawn, a young archivist named Cale Veritas found himself called by a whisper older than mankind's defiance. A whisper coiling from deep within a half-collapsed monastery vault, sealed since the age of apostasy. It was there he first beheld the shard. The relic drifted above the cracked stone like a sliver of blackened glass, refracting nothing, consuming the candlelight around it. It was small enough to fit into a gaunted palm, yet heavy with the presence of something blasphemous. Cale felt an instinctive terror, something primal, inherited from ancestors who had once fled screaming from the first warp storms. But curiosity bound him like chains. Scribes had spoken for generations of artifacts that survived the touch of gods, remnants of battles fought beyond mortal perception. Yet nothing in the lexicanum prepared him for the shard's silent gravity. His breath fogged though the air was warm. The floor vibrated in pulses mimicking a heartbeat not his own. He should have fled. He should have called the priest wardens. Instead, his fingers trembled toward the void dark surface, driven by a pull he mistook for academic duty. The moment skin met impossibility, the vault screamed. Cale staggered backward as visions detonated behind his eyes. Visions of cities drowning in sorcerous flame, of suns devoured by wings of living shadow, of champions etched in sigils he instinctively understood yet could never again articulate without madness. The shard's cold fire surged through his veins. He felt himself stretch across impossibility, as though his consciousness had been cast into the warp like a net. The walls wept blood. The icons of the Emperor's face cracked and peeled. Yet amid the visions he glimpsed something stranger than horror. A memory not his own, a titan of gold and wrath striding through oceans of screaming demons, carrying a broken blade that radiated both agony and hope. Then came a whisper that slithered into his skull, neither male nor female, neither god nor mortal. You seek truth. Let truth unmake you. When Cale collapsed, the shard hovered above him, pulsing like a newborn star hungry for worship. When he awoke, the world felt wrong, too quiet, too distant. He heard the monastery brethren moving outside the vault, their voices muffled as though reality itself had grown thick. The shard rested calmly by his hand, as though it had been waiting. Cale's pupils flickered like unstable flames. His thoughts unfurled in strange patterns, perceiving layers of meaning hidden in the frescoes around him. Where once he saw mere depictions of saints and martyrs, now he perceived veiled warnings. Wars fought not across space, but through the shells of human hearts. He understood then that the vault seals were not meant to imprison the artifact, but to protect the galaxy from the knowledge it carried. Every instinct begged him to leave it behind. Yet the shard rose into his palm as if welcoming him as its new vessel. And in that instant, the monastery bells tolled without being touched. The Inquisition arrived within hours, summoned by psychic echoes that rippled through the subsector like the tremor of a waking god. Inquisitrix Mara Vestilin descended upon Veharis Prime with a retinue of sanctioned psychers, stormtroopers, and servo-orbs humming with detection runes. Her reputation was legend. Entire cult worlds had burned under her scrutiny. Yet even she felt a chill as she approached the corrupted vault. The stone arches seemed to sag as if exhausted by holding back something monstrous. She found Cale kneeling before the shard, eyes unfocused, lips murmuring fragments of languages predating the Imperium. Her psychers recoiled immediately, one vomiting blood, another collapsing in seizures. Mara raised her bolt pistol but hesitated. There was a coherence to the archivist's madness, a directionality that warped the air like heat rising from a forge. She demanded he speak his name, but Kale only whispered, "He is waking." Kale was shackled in rune-forged restraints and sealed within a stasis chamber aboard the Inquisitrix's cruiser. The shard, encased in 6 layers of null metal and wrapped in penitential scripture, lay in a containment vault watched by 24 servo-skulls armed with micro-incinerators. Yet none of these precautions eased Mara's dread. On the journey through the void, she interrogated Kale's fragmented visions using sanctioned telepaths as conduits. What they found was no mere corruption. There were references to a forgotten war at the dawn of time, when proto-empires challenged entities that fed on eternity. There were images of the Emperor, not as humanity's savior, but as a combatant in conflicts erased from all archives. And most disturbingly, Kale described the shard as part of a larger whole, as a splinter of something that should never again be assembled. Several psychers died hearing these truths. Still Kale lived, smiling faintly. Warp turbulence battered the cruiser as they entered a region of space deemed spiritually hazardous. Astropaths bled from their eyes as they attempted navigation. The Geller field flickered with sickening irregularity. Mara immediately suspected the shard's influence, but containment scans showed no breaches. Instead, the corruption seemed to radiate from Kale himself's subtle alterations in his aura, patterns of psychic resonance forming sigils even the Inquisition feared to interpret. The ship felt colder with each passing hour, lights dimmed. Vox channels echoed with voices that were not human. Crew found themselves waking with strange symbols carved into their skin as though traced by invisible hands. Kale remained calm through it all, meditating with disturbing serenity. When Mara confronted him, demanding to know the shard's intention, he simply said, "It remembers what we forgot." And for the first time, the Inquisitrix felt fear not for humanity's survival, but for its history. A catastrophic event struck during mid-cycle prayers. The ship fragmented through a warp fold, tearing reality open like a wound. For one impossible moment, the crew glimpsed an ocean of eyes staring back from the void, ancient, patient, and hungry. The Geller field collapsed. Demons clawed through ruptures in the hull, screaming hymns of inverted worship. Yet the shard, still encased in holy wards, began to glow with a cold, merciless brilliance that repelled the invaders. The demons shrieked in terror, retreating from the relic as though it were poison. Mara realized with horror that the shard was not simply a chaos artifact. It was something older, something that even the Warp-born feared. Kale's stasis chamber shattered without external force. He stepped out untouched by the warp storm, eyes radiating the shard's impossible light. "We are out of time," he murmured, voice layered with echoes not his own. Despite catastrophic damage, the cruiser re-emerged into real space near a dead system marked as uninhabitable. The moment they stabilized, Kale walked toward the containment vault. Every barrier failed at his approach, runes dimmed, locks disengaged, and the scripture binding the shard burned away in silent fire. Mara confronted him, weapon drawn, and demanded he stop. Kale obeyed, but not with fear, with pity. "You think this is corruption," he told her. "It is memory. And memory does not ask permission." He placed a hand upon the shard's containment capsule, and the relic pulsed in recognition. Mara fired. The bolt round dissolved mid-air, shredded by an unseen force. The ship groaned like a dying titan as psychic pressure built around them, bending corridors and extinguishing lumens. Kale looked up, tears streaking his face. "They are returning," he whispered. "And they never forgave us." Inquisitrix Mara did what few of her order would. She retreated. Dragging 2 survivors, she fought her way to the escape shuttle as gravity inverted, and the ship twisted around Kale like a chrysalis. She watched through the viewport as the cruiser folded inward, metal screaming, void light boiling across its hull. Something shifted inside, pressing against reality like a hand against thin fabric. She heard a voice, not Kale's, not human, reverberate through the warp. "We awaken through the willing." Fear clawed up her spine. She issued a system-wide quarantine warning, forbidding all approach. But even as her shuttle fled, Mara sensed the shard's power spreading, like ripples from a stone cast into a black ocean. She realized then she had witnessed not possession, but ascension. And she knew the Inquisition would not believe her. Mara hid in the ruins of an abandoned outpost on the system's scorched moon, transmitting encrypted warnings that the Lords of Terra ignored or dismissed as paranoia. Night after night, she replayed the moment Kale disappeared into warp glow, analyzing every flicker of impossible light. Her mind gnawed itself raw on one question: why had the demons fled? What had they recognized in the shard that even their hate could not confront? She scoured ancient archives, uncovering forbidden fragments of proto-imperial myths tales of beings who waged war on chaos before humanity crawled into starlight. Entities the warp feared. Entities that shattered themselves into fragments to seal an ancient catastrophe. The shard was not corruption, it was a wound. A memory shard, a key. And Kale had become its chosen vessel. As reality thinned around the moon, Mara sensed Kale's presence before she saw him. He appeared in the ruins without footsteps, illuminated by a pale luminescence that distorted the shadows around him. His eyes no longer reflected humanity, they reflected the cold memory of stars long dead. He spoke with unbearable calm. The galaxy has forgotten what haunts it, but the forgotten remembers us. Mara raised her weapon, but her hands trembled. Kale stepped closer. You fear chaos, he murmured. But chaos fears something else. The ground shook as the moon's surface cracked, light bleeding from beneath like molten truth. Mara backed away, heart pounding, but Kale only watched her with a gaze both mournful and resolute. Tell them, he said. Tell them we did not win the first war. Tell them we are unprepared for the second. And as Kale vanished into the rift opening behind him, Mara realized the true terror. The shard had not shown Kale the past. It had shown him a prophecy, a cycle, a return. The crack sealed, leaving only silence. Yet the stars above had shifted, forming patterns she recognized from Forbidden's astropathic warnings, omens of awakening forces older than chaos itself. Forces long thought dead, forces that remembered humanity's betrayal. Mara tried to speak a prayer, but the words felt hollow. Something moved in the darkness beside her, small, soft, like a whisper brushing her ear. She froze. The breath of the void paused. A single voice, faint but unmistakably Kale's, murmured from behind the rocks. This is only the first shard. The whisper lingered in the dead moon's air long after Kale vanished, curling into the ruins like a serpent of cold memory. Mara stood immobile, pulse trembling as though her heart no longer beat by its own will but by the echo of the shard itself. The stars above continued to twist unfolding patterns that resembled the skeletal remains of constellations long forbidden. She tried to turn away, but the vision clung to her mind. Each flicker of starlight seemed to bear a question. What if the Emperor's victory was not salvation, but amnesia? When she finally staggered toward the Vox beacon, her steps felt insubstantial, as though the ground beneath her questioned her right to tread upon it. And across the void, a ripple of unease stirred among those who still prayed blindly, unaware that a forgotten war had begun its slow resurrection. Far across the Imperium, on the shrine world of Viridian Ultima, acolytes knelt in endless rows as incense thickened the sanctum like funereal fog. The high priest, Ordinus Malik, raised a relic blade encrusted with centuries of martyr ashes, preaching that vigilance was the soul of faith. Yet as he spoke, his eyes drifted to dim corners where the icons of the Emperor's face flickered, as though struggling to maintain form. He had sensed the tremor in the warp, faint yet deliberate, like a knuckle rapping upon the door of reality. During evening confession, a young choirling approached him in tears, claiming she had heard a voice during prayer. It said the saints do not sleep, she whispered. It said they remember the first war. Malik tried to dismiss it as childish dread. But when he later knelt alone before the reliquary, the candles extinguished themselves and he felt watched. On the warship Indomitable Spear, Captain Halbrecht Varro trained recruits in the killholds, their bolters roaring in iron synchrony. Yet even hardened Astartes felt the shift in the warp. Dreams haunted them, visions of cataclysms no codex recorded, ancestral memories they should not possess. Varro himself saw the same dream each night, a colossal being of fractured light standing before a throne of broken suns, whispering, "You abandoned us." During council, librarian Filion confirmed that psychers across the segmentum had reported similar manifestations. Some dismissed it as echoes of chaos, others as prelude to a black crusade. But Varro sensed something colder, a dread untainted by malice, a warning carved from the bones of time. When he prayed to the Emperor for clarity, his gene-etched faith wavered. The icons remained silent, and in that silence he felt the first thorn of heresy, doubt. Within the Ordo's archives on Terra, Inquisitor Valther received Mara's encrypted warning. He read her report in solemn darkness, illuminated only by the sickly blue glow of the lumen scribes. Mentions of entities older than chaos, shards of memory, and an archivist no longer human would have condemned any lesser agent as mad. Yet Valther did not laugh. For decades, he had cataloged inconsistencies in the Imperium's oldest records, eras scrubbed, mythologized, or sealed under edict of annihilation. He had long whispered a private blasphemy, that the Emperor's greatest enemies were not the ruinous powers, but truths too immense for humanity to bear. Still, he felt the eyes of the Ordos upon him. Many Inquisitors would burn a world before allowing such ideas to breathe. With trembling fingers, he locked Mara's message behind 12 cryptoseals. It was too late. The thought had already rooted itself. Pilgrims across the Imperium began reporting visions of the watching light, a cold radiance that appeared in dreams or reflections. Some claimed it was the Emperor manifesting his will. Others whispered it was something else, something that had waited long enough for humanity to forget. On frontier worlds, these visions spread like plague, provoking riots, ecstatic worship, or suicides. On one mining moon, a group of workers carved a spiraling symbol into their flesh, claiming it was the first sigil, precursor to all faith. Ecclesiarchal envoys declared it heresy and purged the settlement, but the symbol began reappearing elsewhere, etched unconsciously into metal walls, painted in blood on hive spires, burned into the dust by heatless fire. Among these sightings, the strangest came from an astropathic choir aboard a merchant vessel. Their final transmission was a single phrase screamed in perfect unison, "The Forgotten Return." Mara traveled from outpost to outpost, seeking allies but finding only fearful bureaucrats and priests eager to denounce her. She spoke of Kale's transformation, but few believed a simple archivist could become the vessel of an ancient cosmic memory. Instead, they accused her of warp taint, of treasonous speculation, of undermining faith in the Emperor's dominion. One confessor even drew his chainsword, declaring her visions a test from the ruinous powers. Only the look in his eyes betrayed his lie. He feared she might be right. At night, Mara dreamed of the rift swallowing Kale, but sometimes the vision shifted. She saw not Kale, but herself standing in the luminous tier, hand outstretched toward a shard of her own. And when she woke, she felt the faintest warmth in her palm, as if something invisible had rested there. Meanwhile, Kale's presence stirred the dark seams of reality. On a derelict listening post drifting near the starless void, an automated log activated without being touched. Hololithic cameras captured a figure forming from shimmering motes Kale, or what remained of him. His body no longer obeyed the rules of flesh. Shadows bent around him like supplicants. Instruments malfunctioned as he passed, showing readings not associated with warp entities, but something colder, structured, older than chaos. He touched the station's central lumen altar, and the machine intoned a forgotten dialect, speaking of wars predating human thought. Kale whispered back, matching every syllable as though reciting a lullaby learned before birth. When he disappeared, the station sent one final automated message across Imperial channels. an ancient symbol composed of interlocking shards. Most dismissed it as corrupted data, but 3 Inquisitors recognized it and trembled. Under the vaulted halls of the Conclave Maledictus, senior Inquisitors gathered in shadow to discuss Mara's heresy. Valther attended in silence, observing the hidden fractures among his peers. Some demanded her immediate execution, fearing her warnings threatened the Imperium's ideological foundations. Others hesitated, sensing danger in the swift call for blood. During the debate, the astropathic choir suddenly shrieked, a psychic shockwave rippling across the chamber. For a heartbeat, every lumen in the sanctum flickered, and each Inquisitor saw a flash, a colossal being fractured into countless shards, screaming as reality sealed around it. Silence followed. None spoke of the vision. None admitted they saw it, but the fear was unmistakable. For the first time in centuries, doubt infected the conclave. On Viridian Ultima, High Priest Malak sought to uncover the truth of the girl's vision. He descended into the catacombs beneath the Grand Basilica, guided only by dim votive lamps and centuries of whispered prohibitions. There, he found a forgotten ossuary sealed under 7 purity locks. Within lay murals older than the Imperium depictions of luminous beings, battling a darkness not of chaos, but of cosmic hunger. In the final mural, one such being fractured itself into countless shards, scattering them through time and memory. At the center, painted in ashes that had never faded, was the same symbol appearing across the Imperium. Malak fell to his knees. Everything he had preached crumbled. The Emperor was not the first light, merely the last one that remained. Captain Vero's visions intensified until he could no longer lead without fear. During a battle drill, he collapsed, overwhelmed by memories of a battlefield he had never walked, a wasteland of crystallized corpses, their mouths open in silent hymns. Librarian Thelian performed a mind probe, expecting warp interference. Instead, he found an impossible truth. Varro's visions were not hallucinations, but imprints, echoes of a war fought by humanity's distant progenitors before chaos became sentient. Varro awoke screaming a single phrase, "We are inheritors of a broken throne." Thelian, shaken, concealed this revelation from the chapter. It was too dangerous, too destabilizing. But the psychic residue lingered, twisting his faith until he no longer knew whether he served truth or merely the most convenient lie. Mara's path crossed with Valther's at a remote relay station obscured by cosmic dust. He intercepted her before the Inquisition could deploy kill teams. In the dim light of the station's observation deck, she recounted everything. Kale's transformation, the Shard's awakening, the visions of forgotten wars. Valther listened, and for the first time in decades, he felt the weight of history press upon him like a tombstone. He confessed his own suspicions, records erased, myths that hinted at civilizations predating chaos itself. If Kale's awakening is true, he said, then our entire doctrine is built upon the ruins of a lie older than mankind. Mara stared through the viewport at the shifting stars. Then what do we serve? She asked. Valther had no answer. The revelation came quietly, without thunder or divine flair. As Valther and Mara accessed an ancient, encrypted archive hidden beneath 12 layers of inquisitorial authority, a single sentence flashed upon the hololith, an entry sealed since the Emperor's unification of Terra. It read, "The shards were not destroyed, only scattered. Should they awaken, the Imperium must burn its history to preserve its faith." Beneath the text was a final note, handwritten by an unknown sigil-bearer of the sigillite. "Beware the hidden war, for humanity's greatest enemy is the truth." And as Mara reached toward the signature, the hololith flickered. For a heartbeat, the face of the Emperor appeared, not radiant, not divine, but weary. And behind him, in the static, something vast stirred, watching. A heresy older than chaos had just awakened. The hololith died in a shudder of static, its final motes of light clinging to the air like dying fireflies. Mara felt the silence settle upon her bones, the truth pressing down like a cathedral collapsing inward. Valther exhaled as though he had been holding breath for centuries. The Emperor's fleeting visage, stripped of sanctity, graven with exhaustion, left a wound in both their minds. It suggested not omnipotence, but a burden carried beyond mortal endurance. As the stars flickered in unnatural rhythms outside the viewport, Mara whispered, "He knew." Valther did not answer. The admission would shatter the ground beneath their feet. Instead, he turned away, shoulders trembling. The galaxy had always felt vast, but now it felt hollow, a sarcophagus built around a truth too ancient to bury forever. And for the first time, Mara understood the depth of the Imperium's fear. On Viridian Ultima, High Priest Malik sealed himself inside the catacombs, surrounded by murals that defied canon. He no longer ate nor slept, surviving on incense fumes and the slow erosion of sanity. His prayers became contradictions, half hymns to the Emperor, half desperate pleas to the nameless beings depicted in the walls. He could not reconcile the knowledge that humanity's God Emperor inherited a war he did not begin, a war whose first casualties were those luminous titans shattered into shards. Malik wept before the final mural, tracing the fragmented figure's outline. He wondered which was heresy, denying the Emperor's supremacy or believing he had ever been alone. When the choirlings found him, his eyes had changed, not corrupted, but aged, as though he had seen the dawn of creation and regretted it. Captain Varro drifted in and out of wakefulness aboard the indomitable spear, haunted by memories not his own. During a meditation cycle, he saw the battlefield again, but this time, the crystallized corpses rose, shattering into luminous dust that whispered across the wind. The broken sky opened, revealing a titan of fractured light pointing toward him. "You were built from our ashes," it intoned, "yet you worship the flame that forgot us." Varro tried to deny the vision, to cling to his oath, but his gene-forged heart felt heavier with each passing day. He confided in Thelian, who attempted another mind probe. Instead of entering Varro's mind, he fell into something older, a psychic scar etched into humanity itself. When he emerged, his armor was slick with blood. "We are the afterthought of a forgotten war," he whispered, trembling. Across the Imperium, astropaths burned out one by one, their skulls cracking from the inside as psychic pressure built across the warp. Choirs that had once sung navigational hymns now screamed warnings of architectures shifting in the deep void. Some described colossal shapes moving in perfect synchronization, each one a fragment of a greater pattern. Others saw nothing but a single brilliant eye opening beneath the immaterium. On Hive World Cernic Prime, an entire cathedral collapsed mid-sermon when its stained glass mural rearranged itself into the forbidden symbol of the first sigil. Survivors fled, swearing the glass figures had whispered their names. Ecclesiarchal authorities purged the district by orbital bombardment, but rumors persisted. The mural reformed in the ashes, as though the truth could not be unmade. Valther's private council with Mara stretched into the long hours of a starless night. He revealed fragments from the Sigillite's forbidden memoirs, passages that suggested humanity was not the Emperor's first empire, only his final attempt. The Sigillite had written of beings who fought alongside the Emperor before the Imperium, luminous giants wielding blades of condensed truth. But when these beings fractured themselves to seal an ancient threat, the Emperor alone remained. Perhaps he chose silence, Valther said, because admitting the truth would break the species he needed to survive. Mara felt anger twist inside her, not at the Emperor, but at the enormity of the lie. "Then everything we are is built on absence," she murmured. Valther nodded. "And absence is awakening." On the derelict listening post where Kale had once manifested, a Mechanicus retrieval team arrived. Their servo skulls mapped the warped corridors, their prayers echoing hollowly. But the tech priest overseeing the mission halted before a single glowing sigil etched into the floor, a sigil not carved, but grown, as though the metal remembered the touch of Kale's presence. As the priest leaned closer, the sigil pulsed, and every machine spirit aboard the station screamed. Vox recordings captured a single phrase spoken in Kale's layered voice. Memory is identity. Identity seeks reunion. Half the team clawed their eyes out. The other half vanished, leaving only dust and the faint outline of shards swirling around where they once stood. Mara and Valther took refuge within a forgotten relay monastery orbiting a dead star. The star's dim red glow bled through stained transluminic panels, giving the halls the hue of eternal twilight. In the quiet, Mara felt her faith fray further, not because she doubted the Emperor, but because she now sensed something behind him, something he could not destroy, only delay. She prayed anyway, her voice barely above a whisper. "Guide me," she said. "Show me purpose." But the response that brushed her mind was not the Emperor's. It was softer, older, sorrowful. "Purpose was yours before the empire that stole your future." Mara recoiled in terror, clinging to her rosarius as though it could hold back the cosmic grief that seeped into her bones. On the frontier world of Kelthus Reach, war erupted between Imperial Guard regiments and cultist enclaves who worshipped the first sigil. These cultists did not shriek or froth like those of Chaos. They fought with cold, deliberate purpose, their eyes glowing faintly as if lit by memory. Guardsman Lorik Hale survived the initial skirmish only because he hesitated to fire upon a cultist who whispered, "We knew your ancestors before your species learned fear." Later, Lorik found himself unable to sleep. In every dream, he saw a colossal figure watching him from beyond the edge of existence. Not hateful, not loving, just waiting. When morning came, Lorik carved a sigil into his palm, though he could not recall doing it. His captain executed him for heresy. Yet as Lorik died, he smiled. High Priest Malak tried to spread what he called the buried truth among his most trusted clergy, but fear consumed them. Some insisted he was deceived by xenopsychers. Others accused him of consorting with demons. In desperation, Malak invoked the ancient rite of veiled revelation, summoning his brothers into the catacombs. There he showed them the murals. The silence that followed was so profound it became a force. One priest tore out his own tongue rather than speak what he saw. Another knelt, whispering prayers to both Emperor and Shardborn. The third raised a blade to kill Malak, not out of hatred, but out of mercy. Malak did not resist. Faith had become a battlefield too fractured to navigate. Only a thin thread of purpose kept him alive, the belief that the truth, once seen, demanded witness. Captain Vero finally broke. During a void transition, he saw the warp split open, revealing a vast architecture of crystalline towers arranged in impossible geometries. At their center, Kale stood suspended, shards orbiting his body like an unfolding star map. "You have forgotten your makers," Kale's voice whispered across Varro's mind. "But they have not forgotten you." Varro attempted to resist, but the vision carved itself into his consciousness. When he regained awareness, he found himself in the chapel, kneeling before a shattered aquila. He did not remember breaking it. Thelian stood behind him, face pale, warning that the chapter master had sensed his instability. Varro felt no fear, only inevitability. Kale's transformation reached its next stage. Witnesses across multiple systems reported sightings of a luminous figure drifting between void rifts, his presence warping gravity and thought alike. On a remote agri-moon, shepherds swore the crops turned to glass when he passed overhead. On a mining world, the subterranean strata rearranged themselves into vast sigils visible from orbit. Even Chaos warbands fled his approach, their sorcerers raving that something older than the warp stalked the stars. Kale was assembling something, or seeking it, a reunion, a remembrance, a resurrection of a war older than gods. And wherever he passed, the veil thinned, revealing hints of a cosmos that had existed long before mankind's fragile empire. The final revelation came suddenly. In the relay monastery, Mara woke to Valther standing before the viewport, trembling. Outside, the dead star pulsed with impossible brightness, as though something within it stirred. The light twisted into fractal patterns, the same symbol that haunted murals, dreams, and dying worlds. Mara felt her bones vibrate as a voice filled the chamber. The shards recognized their kin. Valthar turned toward her, tears streaming down his face. His skin glowed faintly, veins igniting with prismatic fire. "Mara, it's in me." She staggered backward as cracks of light spread across his flesh. He smiled through agony, not corrupted, but awakened. "I remember the First War." And as his form began to fracture into shards of living light, Mara realized the truth that would reshape the fate of the galaxy. Kale had not been the only vessel chosen. The dust of the preceding calamity had not yet settled when the galaxy itself seemed to draw a breath, long, cold, and lined with omens. In the hollow quiet between starflares and screams, the survivors of that accursed revelation marched on, their armor carrying the gouges of truths they wished they had never learned. Every step felt heavier, as if the void were tightening around them, extracting penance for oaths once sworn but now bent beneath the strain of doubt. The interrogator who had touched the shard moved like a man shackled to a prophecy, haunted by the voices that gnawed at the edge of hearing. In the cold spaces behind his eyes, fragments of distant, impossible futures flickered like dying candles. Yet still he walked, head bowed, faith sputtering but not entirely extinguished, for he knew that to stop was to drown in the visions that stalked his thoughts like predators. Above a corpse world, lit only by lightning from a poisoned sky, warriors knelt in the mud, clutching their rosaries of fractured ceramite. Their chaplain led a prayer heavy with grief, but in his voice trembled something dangerously close to doubt. He recalled the golden age spoken of in forbidden sermons, the age when the Emperor's gaze was said to warm the hearts of humanity. But now, beneath the glare of a sky ruptured by warp storms, he felt only the whisper of something else watching. He hesitated mid-chant, and the company felt it like a convulsion in their souls. For the first time in centuries, their guide faltered, and the silence that followed was colder than the winter winds that scoured the trenches. The chaplain stared at his trembling gauntlets, convinced he saw faint runes crawling across them, runes that vanished when he blinked. From the vaults of a drifting cathedral ship came the measured lamentations of the sisters who had survived the massacre at Auron's Reach. Their hymns were fractured, their voices raw, as though each note carved open a wound they could not bear to admit existed. One among them, Sister Helixia, pressed her forehead to the rusted railing of a viewing port and gazed into the swirling nebula that promised either salvation or annihilation. She had seen the shard once, only through the eyes of the interrogator, whose mind she had touched in a sanctioned communion. But its imprint lingered like a branding iron upon her spirit. She whispered the Emperor's name over and over, but with each utterance she felt a thin thread unspool inside her chest, devotion fraying slowly, inexorably. In the war chambers of the Ordo Malleus, arguments erupted like plasma bursts. The shard's awakening had torn rifts through their doctrine, exposing fractures long concealed by bureaucratic obedience. Accusations soared, laced with venom and ancient fear. One Inquisitor claimed the visions were a warning from the Emperor himself. Another argued they were the first tremors of a cataclysm engineered by a power older than chaos. Eyes glinted with paranoia, hands drifted toward concealed weapons. No one dared speak the unthinkable, that the interrogator who bore the shard's mark might now be more valuable or more dangerous than any saint or heretic in 10 millennia. When silence finally descended, it did so like a guillotine's shadow. Far across the void, the remnants of a shattered Space Marine chapter drifted through the ruins of their fortress monastery, now little more than a gravestone suspended in orbit. The chapter master gazed upon the cracked mural that once depicted their founding. The golden figure meant to represent their primarch now appeared warped by fire damage, its features strangely twisted as though mocking him. He reached out, fingertips brushing the ash-coated stone, and felt a pulse of something beneath it. Something alive. He withdrew sharply, breath ragged. There had been no warp signature, no psychic ripple, yet he felt watched, judged. The memory of the shard's influence, though not directly witnessed, had seeped into the very bones of the Imperium. In a cloister buried beneath mountains of Ferrocrete, a scribe copied Forbidden's texts with shaking hands. The words on the parchment writhed the moment he glanced away, rearranging themselves into warnings that predated mankind. He knew the penalty for recording such heresies, but he could not stop. The visions commanded him. Each stroke of the quill felt like chiseling away at the foundations of the Imperium's truth. When he finally leaned back, sweat plastering his hair to his skull, he saw a phrase that had not existed moments before. He has seen the sleeping gate. He recoiled, knocking over ink pots, trembling as he realized that whatever force whispered to him was aware. Aware of the interrogator, aware of the shard, aware of the watchers who dared consider themselves rulers of men. Beneath the crimson glow of a dying star, Astra Militarum regiments dug into soil that had been scorched, purified, scorched again. The soldiers moved like ghosts, each one silently mourning comrades lost to visions, madness, or the claws of things they could not name. Their commanders stalked the trenches, reciting protocols as though clinging to the last coherent aspect of reality. When he encountered a young soldier staring blankly into the void, mumbling about doors made of screaming light, he grabbed the boy by the shoulders and shook him, not in anger, but in desperation. Before he could demand clarity, the sky erupted with a psychic thunderclap so vast it pressed every mind to the ground. When it faded, the soldier was gone. No body, no sound. Only a scorch mark, circular, perfect, impossibly precise. Across a forge world wrapped in toxic storms, tech priests argued in binary volleys over an anomaly discovered deep in their noosphere. Data spirits screamed as if flayed. Machine prayers failed to calm them. The anomaly resembled the imprint of the shard, a pattern of impossible geometry that implied a design older than the Omnissiah's teachings. The magos who dared to study it felt his augmetics overheating, flesh blistering beneath metal. Yet he could not look away. In the swirling data, he saw glimpses of a machinery that dwarfed the Mechanicus' greatest forges, a mechanism forged in the warp's darkest cradle. His final transmission dissolved into static, but the last coherent word he sent was a Forbidden's name no living priest should have known. On a battlefield littered with burning titans, a lone gray knight stood atop a mound of wreckage, his armor dented and drenched in ichor. He clutched his nemesis blade as though it alone held him tethered to sanity. Moments earlier, he had cleaved open a demon prince, only to glimpse, in the creature's dying spasms, an image of the interrogator touching the shard. Not a memory, a prophecy, or a warning. The knight dropped to one knee as the realization crashed over him. Something within the interrogator had begun to awaken, something even the warp recoiled from. For the first time in his long and brutal life, the warrior felt fear uncoil like a serpent in his gut. The surviving fleet of the Ecclesiarchy drifted through a region of space where the stars themselves seemed dimmed by grief. Cardinal Vera stood upon a balcony overlooking the procession of torch ships carrying the dead. His prayers faltered as he pondered the increasing tremors in the warp. He had preached for decades that faith was the shield of humanity, yet now he found himself paralyzed by a creeping suspicion. What if faith was merely the veil behind which the truth hid its face? As he gazed at the sepulchral horizon, he saw a distant shimmer, like a curtain of light folding in on itself, silently, violently. He clutched the railing until his knuckles whitened, knowing instinctively that whatever moved within that shimmer was coming for them all. The interrogator himself wandered the halls of an abandoned moonbase, where his escort had perished one by one, consumed by visions too monstrous to articulate. He reached a chamber lined with mirrors of black obsidian. In their depths he saw not his reflection, but 12 silhouettes standing behind him, tall, robed, featureless. Their presence felt ancient, older than warp or star. When he turned, the chamber was empty. Yet he felt a hand, gentle, icy, rest upon his shoulder. A whisper seeped into his mind, neither male nor female, but unmistakably intelligent. "You are nearly ready." He fell to his knees, shaking uncontrollably, knowing he should call for aid, yet unable to summon even a breath. And far beyond mortal comprehension, deep within the warp's labyrinthine folds, a ripple of anticipation spread. Something vast stirred, not a god, not a demon, but something forgotten by history itself. It had waited for millennia, patiently weaving its influence into relics, prophecies, and the fragile lattice of human belief. As the shard's resonance reached it, the entity opened eyes not seen since the birth of stars. The galaxy shuddered, though no mortal sensed the true cause. On the interrogator's skin, new symbols began to bloom like bruises, their shapes shifting, aligning, forming a pattern older than chaos and more terrible than truth. And as the final symbols locked into place, the entity whispered a single word that echoed across the warp like a death knell, a name that should never have been spoken, yet was now awakened. The word the entity whispered reverberated through the interrogator's bones, shattering the last fragile barrier between his humanity and the horror now blooming within him. He stumbled across the moonbase's fractured tiles, each step echoing like a funeral bell. The air thickened, vibrating with unseen wings, and the walls bled faint runes that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He reached the central chamber where the shard hovered, suspended in a cradle of stasis fields that flickered under invisible strain. The relic throbbed with a light not meant for mortal sight. As he approached, the chamber seemed to fold inward, shadows twisting into silhouettes of saints and traitors alike, their hollow eyes fixed upon him. He whispered a final prayer, uncertain whether he begged the Emperor for strength or forgiveness. When his fingers brushed the shard for the second and final time, the moon trembled and reality itself screamed. The Ordomalius strike force arrived only moments too late, warp storms parting as their gunships tore into orbit. The Inquisitors marched through the corridors, their retinues chanting exorcisms that wilted under the pressure of psychic distortion. They found bodies fused with walls, faces stretched in eternal silent cries. At the chamber's heart, they saw him, the interrogator suspended above the floor, haloed in impossible light, the shard orbiting him like a captive star. Inquisitor Merrix raised her daemon hammer, voice faltering as she beheld the transformation. The man's eyes were pools of shifting nebulae. His skin crawled with runes that burned through armor and ceramite. And yet, beneath all that horror, she saw him tremble like a frightened child. "Kill me," he mouthed, but no sound came. In that instant, the chamber erupted. Warp fire surged, twisting steel into serpents of liquid metal. Bolter rounds detonated mid-air, disintegrating into ash. The Inquisitors fought like cornered beasts, chanting litanies as their psychers burned out one by one, souls consumed like sparks in a furnace. The interrogator's body convulsed, arms outstretched as though crucified upon invisible chains. The shard fractured, splitting into thousands of pieces that rotated around him in a screaming halo. He cried out as the entity within the warp reached through him, using his mortal frame like a conduit to manifest its will. The Inquisitors hurled sanctified relics, but each one melted before it reached him, dripping onto the floor like molten faith. Merrix hesitated, then charged, knowing this was her death. On distant battlefields across the sector, the climax rippled like thunder. Titans faltered mid-stride, their machine spirits keening in terror. Astartes paused mid-battle, clutching their helmets as psychic reverberations cracked their Vox systems. Chaplains dropped to their knees, rosaries snapping in their hands as scripture dissolved into blank pages. Civilians screamed beneath boiling skies as the warp swelled like a tide trying to tear open the world. Even the Grey Knights felt it, a cold, suffocating pressure that whispered of a threat older than demons, older than gods. They raised their blades in unison, instinctively bracing for a foe no prophecy had ever dared name. In the void, astropaths clawed their own eyes out, begging for silence. But the silence never came. Within the moonbase, Inquisitor Merrix reached the floating figure and pressed her palm to his chest, whispering a prayer that sounded more like a farewell. For an instant, his true face broke through the distortion, weary, scarred, pleading. She lifted her hammer and invoked the Emperor's name with the certainty of one who knows she will never speak again. The blow landed, a burst of holy fire spiraling through flesh and incomprehensible light. The chamber exploded outward, hurling everyone into darkness. The shard's fragments shrieked, converging into a single spear of radiance that shot upward through stone and into the heavens. Somewhere deep in the warp, something roared, in rage, in pain, or in triumph. When Merrix awoke, she was lying beneath the broken sky of the moon's surface. A crater yawned where the chamber had been, glowing faintly with runes that crawled like living scars. Her armor was half melted, her lungs filled with blood. Around her, only 3 Inquisitors survived, each one staring numbly at the cosmic wound etched into the moon. The interrogator's body was nowhere to be found, but the residue of his presence lingered, a distortion in the air, a faint echo of voices murmuring behind the veil. As Medicae servitors scrambled to reach them, Merrix whispered. He held it back. But not entirely. No one dared respond. Across the sector, the aftermath settled with the weight of a galaxy holding its breath. The warp storms thinned, but did not vanish. The Emperor's tarot yielded only blank, scorched cards. The Adeptus Mechanicus reported anomalies spreading through data archives, like viral ghosts, patterns echoing the shard's geometry. The Ecclesiarchy declared a month of mourning, though their sermons trembled with unspoken dread. Astropaths whispered of a presence drifting through the warp, not a demon, not a god, but something watching, something learning, something waiting. Back on Terra, High Lords debated whether to classify the event as a heresy, a miracle, or an omen. Scriptures were rewritten. Inquisitorial records sealed under threat of death. But rumors spread, as they always do. Whispers of a man who touched a fragment of something beyond chaos and survived long enough to wound it. Whispers that he did not die, that he transcended, or escaped, or was taken. In a forgotten vault, somewhere in the eastern fringe, a lone black mirror flickered to life. Dust drifted around it like falling ash. For a moment, an image appeared, the interrogator's silhouette, standing within a storm of impossible light. His voice was faint, distorted, barely more than a sigh. It's awake. And then the mirror cracked, a single perfect fracture down its center. Something eternal had shifted. But the meaning of that shift remained swallowed by silence, waiting for the moment it would no longer hide. The cracked mirror lay in darkness for many days before the Mechanicus dared approach it, their servo skulls hovering like dim stars in a tomb. They found the vault silent, but not dead. The air hummed with a memory that refused to fade. The interrogator's silhouette lingered in the minds of those who studied the fracture, as though the mirror had not merely reflected him, but consumed a part of his existence. Some claimed the distortion was a lingering echo of the shard's resonance. Others whispered that he now walked in places where reflections held more truth than flesh. But no final answer came, only the low thrum of something ancient withdrawing its gaze. And in that withdrawal, the Imperium felt a coldness settle across its bones, like the chill of a wounded god exhaling. Across the blasted moon where the confrontation had reached its zenith, the wound carved into the surface into a dull, sullen glow. Storms retreated. Dust fell like funereal snow. Merrix returned alone, her retinue lost to time or silence, her mind carrying the weight of 1,000 unasked questions. She knelt at the crater's edge and whispered words no catechism had taught her, not prayers, but farewells. A faint breeze passed over her helm, carrying the scent of scorched stone and something older, metallic, nearly ceremonial. She felt the imprint of his presence below, faint as a heartbeat beneath ice, and she wondered whether mercy or damnation had claimed him first. On a distant shrine world, the cathedrals that once rang with unwavering hymns now stood in quiet contemplation. Their stained glass windows, cracked by warp tremors, cast fractured beams of crimson and gold onto empty pews. A single sister of battle lit votive candles for the dead, their wavering flames mirroring the uncertainty flickering in her own eyes. She placed a final candle beneath a mural depicting humanity's eternal struggle against the abyss. But now, the abyss was no longer a distant adversary. It had moved closer, too close. And as she watched the candle burn, she wondered whether faith was the strength to endure truth, or the means by which truth was softened into something survivable. The Astartes who survived the psychic storm returned to their fortress monasteries and found their sacred halls subtly altered by the resonance. Murals long unchanged now bore faint distortions, primarchs with uneasy expressions, angels whose wings curled inward in fear rather than victory. One veteran knelt before the mural of his chapter's founding and saw, in the cracked stone, a reverent but haunting message: "The first truth is the last burden." He traced the words with a gauntlet still stained by the ash of demons and men alike. And for a moment, he wondered if the Emperor had foreseen this moment, or if even he now watched from a place where certainty no longer reached. In the deep void, torch ships bearing the remains of the fallen drifted in measured procession. Their engines burned low, casting only faint halos across the cold dark. The ecclesiarchy led a final litany, but their voices trembled, doubting whether their words reached any divine ear. One young cardinal, too inexperienced to hide his fear, asked a question older than war. "If the Emperor hears us, why does he remain silent?" His superior placed a withered hand on his shoulder, offering no answer, because no answer remained. Instead, they watched the torch ships fade into starlight, their flames thinning until they resembled lost prayers, rising into a sky that no longer guaranteed mercy. Tech priests across the Forge worlds studied the patterns left behind by the shards awakening. Many claimed they found the imprint of a design that intersected both machine and myth. Those who stared too long into the data runes felt their augmetics grow ice cold, as though touched by the echo of an intelligence that viewed them as insects crawling along the edges of its purpose. In a rare moment of humility, Amagos wrote in his private logs, "Perhaps we have mistaken knowledge for dominion. Perhaps we are not the interpreters of divine machinery, but its custodians or its prisoners." He sealed the log with trembling hands. The Grey Knights meditated in their lunar sanctuaries, their armor dimmed by contemplation rather than battle. Each knight felt the echo of the shard's final scream within their gene-coded souls. It lingered like a scar carved not in flesh, but in destiny. Their highest prognosticar, a warrior who had never faltered in 10,000 battles, asked the question none dared voice: "If this was only a fragment, what sleeps whole?" No one answered, no one could. The silence that followed was heavy, reverent, and terrible. On Terra, the High Lords convened in chambers lined with the skulls of heroes long dead. The debate that followed was cold, methodical, and entirely insufficient. They spoke of containment, of doctrine, of penance. No one dared speak of fear. Yet beneath the marble and gold, beneath the gilded icons and the banners of extinct legions, a subtle vibration spread, the faintest quiver of instability in the foundations of the Imperium's truth. A storm had passed, but its shadow remained. A lone remembrancer, traveling aboard a relic ship drifting between war zones, recorded the ruins left in the shard's wake. He wrote of silent battlefields where power armor stood like statues, their wearers long claimed by forces unseen. He wrote of cathedrals cracked open by psychic backlash, their bells frozen mid-swing. He wrote of banners torn not by wind, but by the tremor of cosmic dread. His final entry posed the questions that had haunted him since the first whisper of this saga. If humanity survives only through endurance, what becomes of its soul? And if truth is a weapon, who among us is strong enough to wield it without being unmade? When he closed his journal, the ink had barely dried when the stars outside flickered, as though exhaling one last weary breath. And in that fading light, the galaxy settled into a fragile calm, not peace, but pause. A quiet interlude before the next cataclysm whispered its name. Thus ends the chronicle of the shard and the soul who touched it. If you wish this tale to continue across the Imperium's endless night, stand witness. Like, subscribe, share, and let your thoughts be recorded in the comments below.